Hello and welcome to our weekly Parshas here with a commentary of the Alshich. I must apologize for this being actually being recorded after Shabbos, simply with being away as I was saying Shiur for the Gateways organization over Rosh Hashanah, and of course going straight into the fast. I'm afraid I didn't have time to prepare this before Shabbos, so of course apologies for that. Anyway, the Parsha is Vayelech. We're really getting towards the complete end of the Torah, and we'll have a look at what the Alshich has to tell us. The sponsorship for the Shiur, once again, is for that little boy, Ori Chaim ben Chana Yehudis. He should have a refuah shalema, and that name, Ori Chaim ben Chana Yehudis, if you could have him in your tefillas, I'm sure that, in fact, I know his parents, his grandparents, and my good self would be very pleased to know that you are davening to Hashem for his complete recovery. Okay, Vayelech. Very short parsha, obviously, shortest, I think. And this is how it starts. Again, I'm recording this because the quality is much better without the ability to share the screen. So if you want to pause and grab hold of your chumash, that would be probably useful because naturally with the Alshich we analyze the psukim. But even if you're not, it will still make sense to you. Vayelech Moshe went, V'yidaber es hadvorme, and he said these words, El Kol Yisrael, to the entire Jewish people. V'yomar, and he said, Alehem to them, Ben meva esrim shana anachi hayim. I'm 120 today. Lo ochel idol tzeselova belovi. I'm not able to go and to come back anymore. Hashem Omar Lion, Hashem said to me, Al Tabra as a Yarden, don't cross this Jordan River. We're going to do 6 psukim, so I'll just carry on reading. Hashem lekecha hu over lefnecha. Hashem will go in front of you. Hu yashmin esagoim. He will destroy the nations, these nations there, milfenecha, in front of you. V'yirishtam, and you will inherit that land. Yeshua hu over lefnecha. You're going to be led now by Yeshua. Kasher dibar Hashem, as Hashem said. But also, lahem kasher also lesikun b'laog malachei amori ula artzam. He's going to do for you under Yeshua's leadership, as he did under my leadership when Og and Sichon were conquered and their lands taken. Hashem destroyed them. The Nosnam Hashem lefnechem va'asisam lehem kekol hamitzah asher tzivos ha'eskem. He did what he said he would do. And then Hisku ve'imtzu. This is a crucial posuk. Hisku, be strong. Ve'imtzu, maybe courageous, might be a translation. Altero, don't be afraid. Alterotza, don't be scared. Because of them. Ki Hashem alekecha hu ha'hilech imoch. Because Hashem is going to be going with you. Lo yapecha v'lo yazvecha. And he's not going to abandon you. He's not going to weaken his relationship with you, and he's not going to abandon you. That's all we're going to look at this week. Now, because it's a short seder and because it's Moshe Shabbos, it might not be as long as normal, but you never know. Let's just start with that posuk, the last one, posuk Vov. And posuk Vov obviously offers up a question. And the question, the Alshich says, and if you look carefully at it and read it with me, you'll see it yourself, at least I think you will. It's a classic Alshich question. As you know, the Alshich looks with laser precision at exactly what the formula, the linguistics of the posuk. Again, chisku ve'imtzu, be strong and courageous. But it's the important thing to focus on here, if you're good at Hebrew, is the fact that it's in the plural. Chisku in the plural, ve'imtzu in the plural. Al tiro, and don't be afraid in the plural. Al taritzu, and don't be scared. Because of them. Ki Hashem elekecho, because the Lord your God, elekecho in the singular, not elokechem, your God, if he's talking to a lot of people, hu ha'hilech imoch, he's the one who's going to go with you in the singular. So it keeps with the finger. He will not abandon you, he will not loosen in the singular his connection to you. So the posuk starts off with the plural and switches to the singular. And the question remains why. But there's more to say than that. So let's revert to the beginning, and I'll tell you what the Alshich says, and then read to you a little bit of the Alshich, and we will soon start to penetrate the mystery of the language of the posuk. Here, the Alshich points out, is something very unusual. The Vayelech Moshe v'yidaber es hadvarim ha'ele el kol Yisrael. Moshe goes, and he says all these words to the Jewish people. Now, the obvious question is, Moshe going? Doesn't he summon them to him? He is the king of Klal Yisrael. He normally calls them. And the way that they were called to listen to him was by trumpets that blew, and the people knew there was a message. It was a message to be conveyed from Hashem through Moshe to us, and they would come. So instead of him summoning them to him, he's now going to them, and that's a unique moment, a very unique moment. So why does it say that? So Yelech Moshe and B'Yedaber is informal. He says these things, but it doesn't say what he says. Because the next pasuk says Vayomer Alehem, and he says to them, "I'm 120 years of age." So what did he say? That's a classic Alshich question. If it says V'Yedaber, let's read this again. Vayelech Moshe V'Yedaber es advorim ha'el, and he says these things, and call Israel to the whole Jewish people. What did he say? Vayomer, and he says to them, so what's the second Vayomer doing here? Vayomer Alehem, it's already said that Moshe said. Is it that he's 120 years today? So why have we got V'Yedaber and Vayomer? B'Yedaber, and he spoke, you should say what he spoke. And if it's a new sentence, he said something else, Vayomer, then fine, but we're missing what he said. So B'Yedaber, Vayomer. And of course, also important to note, as the Alshich points out, B'Yedaber is to speak strongly, sometimes harshly. Think of a father complaining the wrong word, telling off his son who kicked a football through the window. That's a B'Yedaber. The mother, after the father's done shouting at him rather, might speak gently by Yomer. Yomer is much more feminine, much more gentle. So why V'Yedaber and why Yomer? Why does it change? I mean, still to solve the mystery of what he actually said. And he says, I'm Ben Mea Be'esrim Shana, I'm 120 years today. Really? Now just pause for a second. What picture does that conjure up in your mind if you heard that somebody was 120 years? So you naturally imagine somebody who is, well, in a wheelchair, perhaps can't feed himself anymore, old, bent over, shrunken. But as Rashi points out, that was not the case. Maybe I'll read a little bit of Rashi to you. So he says, I am today at 120. So if I can find the Rashi, it'd be extremely good. I'm not able to come anymore. The reason when he says, I'm 120 and I can't come and go anymore, you might think it's because his strength had waned, had disappeared. His mind was sharp, his physical abilities were undiminished by the 120 years he'd been on the planet. What does it mean I'm not able to come and go? Says Rashi, I've got no permission anymore to come and go. Because the Almighty has removed from me the ability or the permission, and that's the Shiur and the role, and passed it to Yeshua. Fine. So therefore, this is the explanation that Rashi offers, but it's still slightly problematic, as I'll see when we turn to the Alshich explanation. But at least the important point to establish is that he was not physically diminished in any way. So therefore, why is he not able to come and go? The coming and going is a little bit problematic. According to Rashi's explanation, he could still come and go. It's just that he was no longer able to occupy the role that was passing to Yeshua. So it's still strange to say he wasn't able to come and go. That's really all we are going to look at, plus the question that we posed in question 6 about swapping from the plural to the singular. Fine. So I'm now going to close the Chumash, or rather move over there, keep open in case I need to come back to it, and then we turn to our Alshich and see what he has to say. So he asks all the questions I have, and then he moves on to give the answers. But because this is a slightly shorter version, then I will cut straight to the chase, as they say. Now, before he deals with this last question about Moshe Rabbeinu going to them rather than them coming to him. Normally he would summon them to him and then he would give whatever message he has to convey to them. But he was going to them. Why? And the Alshich says, we saw before in Parshas Nitzavim, and before that Kisabah, when he gathers and he calls the Jewish people to enter into the last contract, the last covenant between them and Hashem Yisbarach, there he calls them. So why is he not calling them to him? Why is he going to them? Oh, poi holachu le'alehem. Here he goes to them. The fact that he goes is demonstrating that he clearly didn't call them to come to him. And the reason that he didn't is expressed in V'yidaber alem, and he said to them, this is the passage that starts, V'yidaber es divrei ha'el. He said these things. What were the things? I'm 120. Because he was 120, he could not go to them anymore. Let me read on. I'm come to tell you something which is very important. It relates to both you and to me, the fact I'm 120. What does that mean? The Inyan Devarim Alev Yeshua, the Inyan Dabra Alev Yeshua, and to speak to the heart, address Yeshua. And the reason is because he no longer has the authority. Now, the way Rashi said that I'm not being given permission anymore. What it means is, and the Alshich makes this quite clear, I'm no longer the king. My role is now ended. And therefore I have to come to you. I summon you if I'm the king, but I'm no longer the king, because this is the day that I die. Now, they don't know. We've read the book before. We know he lived to be 120, but they don't know that. He's telling them something. I'm dying today. This is my last day. Now, we've got to pause on that for a second. Remember the question we asked about why it says Vidaber, and then it says V'yomer, and it changes to say from the heart, from a strong, powerful statement to a gentle one. There is not any change. It's the same message. That's what the Alshich says. What he had to say to them was the fact that I'm 120. And that means I'm going to die. But when you're breaking bad news, you have to do it very gently. So the V'yomer is telling you how he spoke to them. Now, you may remember this from again, it's the Alshich. If you have been with me through the year, when we looked at Akedah Yitzchak, I think we did Akedah Yitzchak this year, but we'll certainly be doing it as we repeat the Alshich cycle through the Parshas in the year to come, and we'll move on to new territory in the Alshich. When Hashem says to Avram Avinu, take your son, Kachno es bincho es yichidiko asher ahavto es Yitzchak. Take your son, your only son, the one you love, Isaac. 4 expressions. And Rashi says there, why are there 4 expressions? Or asks, why is this 4 expressions? And he says, because one answer is to give him a reward for every response that he gave. When Hashem says, take your son, he says, we've got 2 sons. Yitzchak and Ishmael. Es yichidiko, your only son, says Hashem. And Avram says, well, this one's an only son to his mother, and he's an only son to his mother. He's not willing to reject Ishmael. And then Hashem says, Asher ahavta, the one you love. And Avram replies, I love both my sons. And then he says, Yitzchak. You see, he's telling him bad news. He's telling him he's got to take his son, cut his throat, burn his body to a crisp as an offering. We all know, of course, that's not actually, it's a demand, but it's not a demand that Hashem anticipates the wrong word, it's actually going to require. But anyway, at the end of the day, it certainly teaches you how you break bad news, gently, slowly, as I say in Hebrew, madrega ach madrega, level after level. When I occupied the role of the campus rabbi, the official campus rabbi for the 14 universities of the northwest of England, as I did for 25 years, looking after about 3,000 students every year, I received a phone call one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 a.m. And the phone was beside my bed, so I picked it up, and it was somebody to tell me that one of my students, her brother, had just been killed in a car crash. Sadly, him and some friends at the car had lost control, and they crashed into a tree. It was a rather macabre or unhappy aside, but if you were ever in a car and you were losing control of it, if you still had sufficient control and you could hit either a tree or a lamppost, try and hit a lamppost. Because a lamppost is going to buckle and absorb as a consequence some of the force of the impact. Trees don't buckle. So the car and the passengers in this particular case absorbed the entire force of the crash, and sadly her brother had been killed. My job, not an easy one, was to tell this young lady that her brother had died. I didn't go, of course, at 4 o'clock in the morning. I went and I got a friend of mine, his wife, I found him. It was a doctor, and his wife was active helping me on campus to come and with me because obviously when I brought the news, this girl was going to need a hug and a cuddle, which obviously I couldn't provide. Anyway, so we arrived at 8 o'clock to the accommodation at the university where this poor girl was, and I knocked on the door. And after a few moments, a very curious head with tired eyes peered round and I said, obviously won't mention her name, "Hi, it's me. I need to speak to you." And she said, "Oh, okay." And I'll just get dressed. So she went and got her robe, etc., whatever. And she came out and we sat with some chairs there. And I said to her, just copying exactly the formula of the Torah, as explained by Rashi, in 4 levels, I said, "I'm afraid I've got bad news." And she said, "Well," I said, "It's about your brother." And she looked and I said, "There's been an accident." And then, as she started, I said, "I'm really very sorry." And that's how I broke it stage by stage. Of course, I spoke more slowly than that, feeling my way, seeing her emotional reaction as it went along. Because when you're breaking really bad news, then the breaking of the news has to be done extremely sensitively and very, very gently, slowly, uh, incrementally, uh, building up to the situation. But just pause for a second. The reason I cite this story is simply because it struck me earlier today when I was thinking about this that obviously, I mean, if you think for a second, when she answers the door of her student accommodation, student flat, or student apartment at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm standing there. I didn't go and visit students at 8 o'clock in the morning, and so what must she have thought? Something's up, something bad. And even if she wasn't particularly consciously aware of it, even subconsciously, she's going to be aware of it. And that, I suppose, just appearing there in that way was itself the first hint to her that I've got something bad to tell her, which, as it were, is the first stage of uh, protecting her or trying to lessen the blow that I'm about to deliver. The exact same thing is true when Moshe Rabbeinu goes to them. When Moshe Rabbeinu comes to them, and the first time in 40 years, and they know he's the king, and they should be being called, why is he coming to us? That's already an indication and a signal that something's up, something big is happening. And there must be feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And then he tells them, "I'm 120 years today, and I can no longer do, as we now understand, I can no longer do the job. The job is being passed to Yeshua." Now think for a second of their reaction to this terrible news. He has been their leader. He has saved them on two major occasions when they faced annihilation from heaven, from the making of the golden calf to the believing of the report of the spies. And he saved them on numerous other occasions. And he is their leader. Now he says, "Actually, the news I'm here to break, the reason I've come to you is because it's done. My job is done." So let's read on in the Alshich, and then let's come back to that concept, because we're going to carry on investigating the psychological reaction to being told that somebody whom you love is either died or is about to die. Shehu, Masha again, I want to talk to you about what's something which is it concerns you and me, and that is I'm 120 today, and that Abba King Yosef, that's why he goes to them. Ki ein shilton b'yom ha'mobas, to tell them I'm no longer your king. My task has ended, my role has ended, my authority has ended, because this is the day I die. Masha ein kin lamala. What before? In the previous two Parshas, when he gathers, he calls the Jewish people to him, "I'm still the king. Then I can call you." The reason I can call you, the reason I've come to you, is because I'm no longer your king. It's already happened. Kadei la'avir bris Hashem. The previous one was just this contract we talked about. We find in the side of Nitzavim. V'zeh omer lamala atem Nitzavim l'fnei Hashem. That's what it says. You're standing in front of Hashem. Sure, Al Hanageh, I love His Baruch, because I called you, because no, there was something important that a role I had to fulfill as the king, the intermediary between the King of Kings and the Jewish people. Malkein, Atam Nesavim Nafon, that's why you're standing in front of Him. Ki Alola Avda B'Beis Hashem, because there was this new contract, this new covenant to enter into. Ach Ata, but now, Moshe Vayelech Moshe Alem, the reason that Moshe goes to them, who liyaz had devorim alehem shehu ben mea be'esrim shana, is to tell them I'm 120. But oifen she'omra v'yidaber ein ha'inyan lahagid mad shedaber. When it says v'yidaber, it's not telling him what he's going to say. It's coming to tell him. The pasuk is telling us this is what he was going to say, but how he did it was not with dibur, harsh, strong, powerful words, but with gentle words. I've come to tell you that this is our time up. Now, the interesting, I don't know if you've ever been involved in this in your life. Sadly, obviously, as a rabbi, I have. I've just given you one example. But when somebody dies, there is sometimes a very interesting, well, interesting is the wrong word. Maybe it is interesting, but that sounds a bit too callous. The obvious distress and pain and upset goes without saying. But very often, and this is surprising, there's anger. There's anger. I don't just mean anger with God, which God's used to it. He's the blame for everything. But anger with the person who's died. Now, I don't know if you've experienced that, but people get angry. Why did you go? As if people have any control over when they go. I mean, sometimes they do. I'm not talking about suicides, but generally, why are you angry? You just are. Because you're hurt. And when you're hurt, you're not being rational. It's all emotion. Why did you die? Why did you leave me? Children particularly feel this. Why did you leave me? This is exponentially magnified when it comes to that the parent didn't leave physically, but left their life as when the family unit breaks up after a divorce. Statistics show quite clearly that it's more difficult for children to deal with the divorce of a parent than the death of a parent. And there's one very simple reason for that. At the death of the parent, for example, my late wife, Alshich, Shalom, who died after 5 years of cancer, then nobody is blaming her for her demise, and nobody's blaming me for the fact that she got cancer. But if there is a divorce, inevitably in the minds of the children, there is some level of accusation which could almost always be justified, that you must have played a part, you didn't try hard enough, or whatever. I'm not saying that that's always the case. In fact, in some cases, it is, instead of a little bit of wrong or wrong on both sides, which is almost always the case when it comes to divorce, but not always. And incidentally, wrong on both sides doesn't mean to say it's equal. I'm not saying 50-50. The husband was 50% wrong and the wife was 50% wrong. It could be 90-10. But even if it's 1% wrong, that means you did something wrong and allows the distress of the child to find a focus and the blame game to start. But I certainly know of cases. I remember one case of a girl in the UK, I shall say, in England, who went to to get married to a fellow, and she was back a week later, back a week after the chuppah. It turned out, and I don't know how they concealed this, but the boy had suffered from severe mental illness. I mean, the people who put this shidduch together, I mean, I won't comment on them, but you get the idea. How they concealed this in the girl, I don't know. Maybe he was heavily medicated, I just don't know. But on the wedding night, he sat in the corner in the fetal position, corner of the hotel bedroom or wherever they were having their marital night, crying and shaking, and it was over. Now, in that case, it's completely his fault, or the people who put this disaster together, and not the girl's fault in the slightest. So occasionally a divorce occurs when it is 100% the other person's fault, and there is no blame available. But generally, in the minds of the person who is suffering as a consequence, which are primarily the children, then there is blame available. Blame which can be sometimes very, very angrily expressed. Because even if it's, in the case we're talking about, Moshe Rabbeinu's going to die, that doesn't make any sense. Or does it? Is Moshe Rabbeinu's death, does it fit into the category of the irrational, why did you die, which is irrational, but people still feel, or the rational, Why did you cause the end of our relationship? Why did he cause the end of the marriage, of the family, of us being together? Which is a rational um, analysis, if often unfair. And the answer is that there's a strong possibility that you'll think, that they will think, because remember, they're going to be extraordinarily distressed. In fact, they were. We know they were extraordinarily distressed. They were bereft. I can't think of words that could strongly express how lost the Jewish people were upon hearing that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to die. So he knows he's got to speak to break the news gently. That is the going to them. That's the first hint that something's on. Then he speaks. But what does he say? I'm 120 years today. But the interesting thing is, I'm 120 years today. That's very, very critical. And so let me just read that to you. So if I'm 120 days, years old today, it's my birthday. It's also the day I'm going to die. Now that's critical. You see, there is the tradition that real tzaddikim, the greatest tzaddikim, often they live completely full lives. They die on the day they were born. In other words, everything in their life, it's a complete circle, and maybe a bit like an escalator. Every day was a step going up. They went up and up and up. Each day was used up positively in growing. So you might think that it's my fault that I'm leaving you. Why? It could be the blame game, just like children will blame the divorcing parents for one's departure. Why? Because you caused it. You hit the rock. When you hit the rock, Hashem said, that's it, you're not leading him into Israel. It's your fault. You're leaving us. And it's your fault you're leaving us. Because if you hadn't hit the rock, you would have been here. You would have been able to take us into the land of Israel. Who knows what's going to become of the Jewish people, what's going to happen to us without your leadership? Why did you hit the rock? And then he turns around and says, no, I'm 120. That's what you want to tell them. And in telling them that, it's going to solve their pain. Don't think that I'm leaving you, and I chose to leave you, even inadvertently by making the mistake of hitting the rock, which I think you'll find if you look at the Shiur online, we address that properly. It's very, very, very hard to find anything that Moshe did particularly wrong, and certainly when he makes it quite clear at the beginning of Devarim that I asked Hashem to ignore it, forgive me, and let me take you into the land of Israel. And he said, don't ask me even one more time, to which the Rabbonim turn around and say, the implication of Hashem saying, don't ask me even one more time, is that had he asked them one more time, Hashem would have to have acquiesced and let him come in. And he says, Hashem is angry with me for your sake. It was imperative that Moshe Rabbeinu did not lead them into the land of Israel, which I might have time to squeeze into this Shiur as well. But the proof that wasn't, I'm not dying prematurely. I could have lived longer. I was meant to live longer. Is I'm 120. I've lived a full life. I'm dying on the day I was born. It's a perfect circle. And I haven't done anything wrong that diminished or shortened my span of life here. It was a complete 120. The hitting of the rock, that in itself was not enough, as Hashem hinted. One more time, and I've got to let you go. But it's important I have to tell you, I suppose, why it means that Moshe Rabbeinu had to die outside. You see, he says, Hashem is angry because of you. In other words, not me hitting the rock, but because of you. What does that mean? Well, we all know when the men, and it's the men only, believed that the accusation of the spies, then Hashem says that generation of men are going to die outside Israel. You didn't believe in the land of Israel, you didn't believe in me sufficiently, then you are going to die outside the land of Israel. Now, as you know, there is a certain contradiction between negative forces and positive forces meeting. You see this a lot in Judaism. Tumah and Tahara don't mix. Kohanim, who exemplify the highest spiritual level of the Jewish people, can't go to a Beis Olam, a place of Tumah, death. All death relates and revolves around, all Tumah rather, revolves around death. So there's a tradition that Hashem, the Shekhinah, the presence of God, doesn't go outside Eretz Yisrael, doesn't manifest itself outside Eretz Yisrael. This is very complicated, very Kabbalistic, and so I'm not going to go into this in great length, but let's just take that as a given. So if the entire generation of men, of all men, are going to die and be buried outside Eretz Israel, then he can't collect those souls and take them up to heaven. The Shekhinah can't go down and collect them. So what does he do? So the Alshich gives a very interesting motion. Imagine you're walking down the street in Tel Aviv. There's a blackout, power failure. All the streets go dark. And just a few seconds before the lights went out, you went into your pocket to bring out, I don't know, your car keys or something like that, and you took out a small coin, a 5 agarot coin, and you drop it on the pavement on the sidewalk. So it's now pitch black, and people are in high-rise buildings, and you start shouting, "Help! Somebody bring me some light, bring me a flashlight, bring me a torch. I've dropped my 5 agarot." Now who's going to get up and go downstairs in the dark because this guy's lost a penny? Is he mad? The fellow realizes nobody's coming. What does he do? He goes in and takes out a 500 shekel note. That's a lot of money, and he over $100, over £100, and he drops that on the ground and he starts to shout, "Help! I've dropped 500 shekel note." Now people's sympathy will certainly be aroused by that. The fellow's lost a lot of money, so somebody comes down, or some people come down with light, with flashlights and torches, and shine it on the ground. He gets his 500 shekel note, and at the same time, he picks up that little coin, so he gets everything. The analogy of this little moshel is that the generation of people who really don't deserve to be forgiven, Hashem has found a device, because the midas hadin, the strong sense of justice in heaven, is going to say, no, they deserve to die there, and you certainly can't go down. The Shekhinah can't go down the presence of God and collect them. But if Moshe Rabbeinu is there, he's the 500 shekel note. Then if Hashem's going down to pick his soul up, as it were, bending the rules to pick his soul up, then he can bring up the other souls at the same time. That's the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't go. There's a lot more to say in that, but that'll do for moving on. So here he tells them, don't think I've done something that made me die prematurely. I'm leaving you prematurely. This is the day that I'm finished. This is the day that Yeshua takes over. And interestingly, as the Gemara goes on to say, you can't have, in the Gemara on Shabbos, you can't have two kings at the same time. When Yeshua's time has come, automatically Moshe Rabbeinu's time has gone. And that's the message he's giving them. He wants them to be calm and realize that Yeshua's leadership is going to be as similar, in fact, very similar to his own. That is to say, let's see with that as the introduction how it all fits. V'yama aleim ben meva esrim shana anaki, I'm 120. I'm not able to come and go. We were struggling with that. But if Rashi says, of course he can come and go. The Alshich says, of course he can come and go. The Alshich says, and I think this is really very clever, what it means that I'm not able to bring you, cause you to come to me and go. That makes sense. Even if he's physically okay, and as Rashi says, that means that he was physically okay, but he no longer had the permission to carry on his role. But the Alshich refines that a little bit. That carrying on in the role means to get you to come to me and then go after I finish telling you what I have to tell you. That's what I'm not. It means I'm not able to come and go. Bad translation. I'm not able to make come and go. You to come and go to me. My kingship's over. And he tells the Jewish people that. And he says, that means say, it's not that I've provoked my own death, a premature death. No, I'm 120. It's a complete cycle. I die in the day I was born. I'm not able to come and go. Hashem said to me, don't think I didn't try. I did try. But Hashem says no, for the reasons we've just explained. Then the next posuk, Hashem Elokecha hu over lefanecha. So you might think, the Jewish people might think, with you gone, then we won't have the same investment in us, contact between Hashem, who has been led us and fought our wars for us up till now. He says, no, Hashem will still go in front of you. You're not diminished by the fact that the role of leadership has been taken over by Yeshua. And then it says, go and fight against the nations of the arm of Fanecha by Yerishtam, Yeshua, who I overlook now. You will inherit them, and Yeshua will go in front of because Hashem, just like God said. So there's no reduction in God's closeness to the Jewish people as a consequence of my death. We're still okay as a Jewish people. Yeshua is going to lead you. But also Hashem lehem kasher also l'sichel v'la'og mori. And how he's going to do that? It's the same way as he did it with Og and Sichon. That's it. You're still going to fight a war, but you're going to win the war because I will change the mazel, says the Alshich. I will change the mazel of these non-Jewish nations so they're not able to win. It's interesting because they're very, very mighty nations. So you could say that Hashem will just sort of destroy them miraculously. That's not what's going to happen. You still have to do your job as soldiers, but you're definitely going to win because Hashem will take away their ability to beat you. So the same thing. Hashem will give them in front of your hands. And everything is promised that's going to come true. But then we came to the last question, the Alshich has that we were looking at and where we started. Chisku ve'imtzu, it's in the plural. Chisku ve'imtzu, be strong, be courageous, al tirod, don't be afraid, al tarotzu, all in the plural. From them, and then because God said that you're in the plural, you're God, and the kecho is your singular God. Hu ha'holech imoch, he's the one who's going with you. Now it's in singular. He won't abandon you, it won't weaken that connection. Why does it's swap to the singular? And here the Alshich says something which I think is very, very important. And because in just 2 or 3 days' time, on Wednesday night, is going to be Yom Kippur, it's important to bear in mind something critical. Hashem can forgive you for anything. Anything. Murder, says the Mesilas Yesharim. Adultery. These are big things. And yet, Hashem can forgive that. And Yom Kippur is all part of that forgiveness process. In fact, Yom Kippur can achieve things that Teshuvah in its own right can't achieve. There's only one category, only one thing that Hashem can't forgive. And that's what you did to other people. That's what you did to other people. That you have to get them to forgive. So, of course, the 2 categories of mitzvahs being Odom Lamokum, mitzvahs between you and Hashem, and being Amachera and interpersonal relationships, He can't forgive you for what you did to somebody else. That you have to deal with. You have to go to them, you have to apologize, or tell them that they've upset you, and get them to apologize to you. You're not allowed to bear a grudge. And of course, the apology is not enough. Even if they forgive you, if you can put it right, if you can repair the damage. If you stole $1,000 and they forgive you, and you've got the $1,000 to give back, or you can get $1,000 to give back, you must do that. You must repair the damage. It's important to bear in mind that the relationship of the Jewish people to each other, it lies in our hands. And there's a hint to this here. Because there's nothing more dangerous to the future of the Jewish people than factionalization and fractionalization and infighting. So that's why the Pasuk starts off talking to all the Jewish people. It says, Kisko, you will be strong and mighty, in the plural. And then it swaps to the singular. Because all that I've promised you, that you're going to win these wars, and I will change the mazel of the enemy in front of you, so no matter how mighty they are, it just won't work for them. It just won't be any good, and you're going to beat them. There is one condition, that you're united. That Kol Yisrael Arevim Zen, all of the Jewish people are together. We have apologized, we have forgiven, which we must do whenever we can, in order to create the unity which is always the guarantee of the success of the Jewish people in the face of our enemies. And on this Yom Kippur, when we've looked at what's happened in the world in the last year, and particularly the huge game-changing collapse of what's called Pax Americana, the American-led Western peace in the world, we're going to need that. We're going to need that guarantee. So that's why it swaps from the plural, talking to the Jewish people as a whole, to one. So it's one person. You've got to be one. If you want me to intercede on your behalf, then the bit of you that I don't control, that I can't deal with, which is entirely your responsibility, is the unity and the social cohesion and the friendship and the love between Jews. And that's an important message as we're heading towards Yom Kippur. So I hope that will be useful. And I hope you enjoyed this little share. And I look forward after Yom Kippur. Don't know how exactly it's going to work with Sukkot. We might have to. I'll try and get as many share as possible. And wish you all a very successful fast. A Gemar Simatoiva, a wonderful Sukkot. And I look forward to our new series starting up of the Alshich HaKadosh. So delving into different and new bits of the Alshich that we haven't covered this year as we move forward into the next. Have a wonderful week.